Hello and welcome to this next panel session, which I think you're going to be really excited about. The topic of this panel is capacity building and multilateral collaboration for realizing national adaptation plans. We have, my name is Billy Afghan, and I'm the CEO of Geni Earth, and we work on leadership capacities and convene conversations with organizations and people who want to create the future in a new way. I'm excited to have, to introduce the panel here, and actually I have control, so I'm gonna, eek, there we go. Okay. First, we have somebody virtually, Jane Davidson. Jane, are you with us? I'm going to introduce you, but I want to make sure we hear you and we can see you. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent.
Greetings from Wales.
Jane is dialing in virtually from Wales. Jane is the chair of Wales Net Zero 2035, and she's charged with examining potential pathways to accelerate climate action in Wales in a just and nature-positive way, according to the Well-Being of the Future Generations Act. Her know-how and her passion were forged as the Welsh Government Minister, University Pro Vice-Chancellor, and Land Restorer. She's also the author of #FutureGen, Lessons from a Small Country, which I have read, and it's outstanding. So Jane is with us. We also have Janvier Lavelle. Janvier has led the successful implementation of distributed ledger technology pilot in Haiti and many other things, which she's going to share with us, and I'm excited to share with you. Which is improving food security and fair pricing for farmers and customers. She's recognized as a leading figure in technology, including nominations for the Financial Times Top 100 BAME. What is BAME? Can you use your microphone?
Black Asian. Got it. I do technology, but I can't figure out the mic.
I know.
It's the term that they use for BIPOC, which in the U.S., which is people of color. So this is the Black, Asian, and minority, and indigenous people in the UK. That's the term that they use. BAM.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. In the UK, Tech and Computer Weekly's Women in Software. She's experienced in providing strategic direction for distributed ledger technologies and advising governments on emerging technology initiatives. Lovely. Excellent. We have Angelos Pastras. Angelos is an experienced project manager from a civil and environmental engineering background. He's passionate about climate action and youth empowerment. Having recently been awarded the Carbon Champion status by the ICE. What is ICE? Use the mic. You have your own microphone over there somewhere. Do you see it?
Hello, thanks. It's the Institution of Civil Engineers of the UK, so it's essentially a technical institution similar to most countries, I would say.
Great. You've been a delegate at COP26, COP27, and COP28, and the acting lead for the Commonwealth Sustainable Energy Transition Youth Action Group. Working in the energy sector since 2019, he's contributed to the development of more than 600 megawatts of flexible battery energy storage systems in the UK and supported more than 2 gigawatt as a consultant, currently lead engineer with DNV. Yeah? Great, thank you. We had a fourth young woman, Sarah Mansour, who unfortunately just got sick this morning and isn't going to join us, but I think we have more than enough to talk about here. So I'm going to ask Jane if you could start with us. You've had an incredible amount of experience over the last 12 years in trying to make adaptive plans work in Wales. Can you share some of the most important lessons you're learning about the work you've done, and maybe throw in what are you most proud of? And hi there, it's nice to see your face. And you let me know. I have your slides, so you let me know when you'd like me to use them.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Billy. Thank you for inviting me to join this panel. And I've got an echo at the moment. I don't know whether that can be sorted, but thank you very much. I don't know whether we can sort this echo.
Sorry, what's the challenge, Jane?
So the challenge is
that you have an echo.
My words are coming back to me about 10 seconds after I say them. So
I'm not sure. The tech gentleman in the back, is there anything we can do about that?
Okay, let's
I don't know that we can, Jane, sorry. I don't see him back there.
Right. Thanks very much for the invitation to join this panel. And I'm really, really looking forward to a proper conversation with the other panelists, because for me, any chance to have a real discussion about the way we get real action is incredibly important. And Wales is a tiny, tiny country. It is one of the 4 nations in the United Kingdom. It has 3 million people and 10 million sheep. And what we've been trying to do over a very long time in Wales is to find a narrative in the context of taking decisions that will fit the current climate and nature challenges better. So, Billy, if you could start the slides, I'd be grateful.
Okay. Your first one is up.
So my current role is as chair of the Wales Net Zero 2035 Challenge Group. And that's a very long title. And I've put all the kind of appropriate web links here. And if people are interested in our work, then please start with having a look at Net Zero 2035 Wales. The point of what we're doing is actually to recognise the science and take action more speedily. I'm interested in knowing whether there are other countries in this space, particularly in the global north. At the moment, I know that Finland is in similar space to Wales. Finland passed a Climate Act in 2022 and has made a commitment in terms of carbon neutrality by 2035. And my challenge is to do exactly that in the context of Wales and to find pathways to deliver on that. Second slide, please, Billy. This is my explicit challenge. And this is a challenge that has jointly been given to me by the Welsh Government and also one of the main opposition parties, a party called Plaid Cymru, which translates as the Party of Wales. And the importance for me about this challenge is that this is 2 political parties that together are 2/3 of the Welsh Parliament and therefore able to make decisions that could be taken through politically. And that's an incredibly important point, because there are lots of people trying to do things where there is not sufficient political support to make change. And yet we need political support to create change. And we need political support at this COP, and we need political support across the world if we're going to deliver pathways to change. So my focus, and the focus of my independent group, which comes from across the world, is looking at what do 10-year pathways to net zero really look like in practice, and how can those 10-year pathways be translated in a way that will be acceptable and to the people of Wales, and where the people of Wales can be invited to participate in how those pathways are created. And you will see on this slide that this is looking at the impact on society and sectors of our economy and how any adverse effects may be mitigated, including how the costs and benefits are shared fairly. And this is where our third slide is incredibly important. Thanks, Billy. And this third slide is in relation to the legislation that Wales still remains the only country in the world to have legislation to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. And we passed legislation in 2015, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And on this slide, you see the two key components of that. On the left, you see the 7 goals linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, which are how Wales has interpreted, with the support of the UN, the delivery of Sustainable Development Goals in our setting. So we have redefined prosperity as low and zero carbon. We've redefined resilience in the context of enhancing biodiversity, acting on climate change. We've redefined health, not in the context of how systems respond to how many doctors or nurses are in place or how quickly ambulances respond, but what are the conditions for a healthier population? What are the conditions in terms of creating a more equal population? How can we create communities that are more cohesive? How can we celebrate our language and cultures? Wales is already a nation of sanctuary. And how can we make sure that we are globally responsible, that any action we take in Wales is the same kind of action as we take in all our international dealings? So there's no notion of offshoring any emissions reduction. Now, those are all on the face of our Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, but also on the face of that act is how do we think and how do we ensure that all the public services in Wales, in the responsibility of the Welsh Government, think long term, that they think preventatively, that they integrate outcomes, they collaborate with each other, and they involve people about whom decisions are being made. So the importance of this is that if you want to, for example, speed up energy transition, and a report came out only yesterday from the Wales Centre for Public Policy looking at what the key constraints and opportunities are in Wales if we are to deliver this ambition of net zero by 2035. But because of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, it actually ensures that we cannot deliver that at the expense of the environment. And that's where the kind of national adaptation plan element becomes so important. So instead of looking at renewable energy, and we need to double or more than double that capacity and keep that rate up for the next 12 years if we're going to deliver, if we are going to do that and we cannot be negative in the context of the environment, and we are focused on a just transition, these are welcome constraints. And where I make a comparison with Finland is because it has legislation in place to do that. At the moment, it's targets for Wales, not legislation, but also that fundamental principle of do no significant harm that is being used in the Finnish setting is a very, very strong principle for us. Now, I'm assuming that as we get into conversation, we'll start looking more at individual actions in the energy space for how to do this in a responsible but accelerated way. But I just wanted to start this conversation with the idea that actually, if you have a value system that applies to everything a government does, that value system actually drives different kinds of actions. And in the 8 years since this has been in place in Wales, what we're seeing is huge ambition, particularly from the third tier executives and younger, and particularly from the Wales Youth Parliament and young people in Wales, that actually having this value system will enable us to respond to polycrises in a way we could never have done before. Thank you, Billy.
Jane, thank you so much. And I just want you to know that there are several people in the room that are taking pictures of the slides and capturing what you're sharing. I remember, and one of the takeaways of reading your book was this keeping the long view, the resilience and the opportunist qualities that you had to take to get all of this done, and particularly the Future Generations Act in 2015. What advice would you have for people that are on how to deal with really difficult things when it looks like you can't get anything done? What did you do? What were you faced with, or anything that you would share about what it takes to get that kind of accomplishment done?
Well, thanks, Billy. It's a really interesting question, because you're kind of, this is about 20 years of effort. I know that everybody on the panel today is put in at least 20 years of effort, and I'm sure that many people in the audience have done the same. But I remember it made sense when I came to speak in Harvard, actually in 2015, and I was introduced to what we called the Harvard squiggle at the time. And that is that if you imagine that you're trying to do something, and all those sort of public documents you see have trajectories that go like this, we decided to do this here, and here we are. And we did it. Whereas in fact, what really happens is you kind of you decide this, and then you plummet, and you go below the level I can even show, and then you wiggle back up again, and then you have another plummet, and then you go then somebody changes, a new policy comes in, a new law comes in, and you're on your way up, and then down you go again. And that's the reality, I'm afraid, of consequential change. And the point is that at every point you plummet, you still have to believe you can do it. And I think it's in many ways, when people have asked, sort of me, how this has been delivered, I think it's because we never gave up, because we believed. And I was out of politics by 2015, but I was still there, looking at how to do this. We believed that we really wanted to do this. And it was tested through a number of ministers, none of whom could really engage with all of it, but all of whom contributed to some of it. So all those goals, those ways of working, have come about from people who started off skeptical and then realized that actually this was incredibly exciting. Because when you release imagination, when you give permission to think differently, that is what enthuses people and makes them believe they can do things. And also to be part of a movement across the world that wants to respond to challenges, that wants to respond to the scientific challenges in a timely fashion. So I suppose all of that is about don't give up, just keep going. And your moment will turn into a movement, because there's always an audience for good ideas. Yeah, and particularly if you also demonstrate that you don't apply hypocrisy, so you don't say one thing and then do another. And I think that's a really, really important point in this space. It shouldn't be, considering the hypocrisy on the other side of the equation, but it is a really, really important point in this space. So,
thank you.
Go from the heart, don't give up, and you'll just find the best group of people to work with across the world.
Excellent, Jane. Great advice. Thank you so much. And I would just like to say, both, of course, to our panelists and to the people listening, that we're going to try to provide about 10 minutes toward the end. If you have something you'd like to add to the conversation, build on, or if you'd like to ask a question of anyone, we're going to provide time to do that. So right now, I'd really love to turn to Janvier. Janvier, we're curious about the distributed ledger technology pilot in Haiti that you did, but you've also done a lot of other things and work in this space. So I'm going to, share, if you could share a little bit about what that work is, and looking back, what lessons learned you might have had with that, and then share any other examples of current work that you're working on that you would think would be really incredibly valuable for us to hear. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me today. So distributed ledger technology, for those who don't know, you probably heard, so probably by show of hand, what do I ask? How many people have heard of Bitcoin? So that's what's the killer app that distributed ledger is built on. So it's about distributing information and recreation of trust. But not ever, sometimes I say using blockchain is like calling tissue paper a Kleenex. In the US, I say, can I have a Kleenex? Doesn't mean I'm getting the brand of Kleenex. It's the same thing with the blockchain. So we were asked by the World Bank and the government of Haiti to bid for a project which was about creating capacity of access. It was very simple: access to market and access to financial services. And how would you do that for smallholder farmers, which are at the bottom 40% of poverty? And my challenge that I always talk about is the fact that years ago, the farmer, or he or she, was the richest person in town. Nowadays, we're talking about them being at the bottom. And we also have a challenge, obviously, with overproduction, because the overproduction, it doesn't mean it's getting to market. And when we talk about the second biggest culprit for the green gas emission, it is actually agriculture at 25, sometimes we hear 30%. Why is that? It's because 1/3 of it never makes it to market. So yes, we waste. Yes, we should be consuming, only taking what we're going to consume and not throw as much. But there's about enough to feed 2 out of 6 people, and we would not have world hunger. So how do you change system? And it cannot be, so it's not a systematic only. The system is the catalyst that supports that. So it is a big case of change management. In Haiti, we didn't start with the system. They started with the agronomists, the economists, and also the industrial engineer, which went in and had conversations. So I think in terms of adaptation plan, it needs to start the conversation with the individuals who are going to be impacted. I say it's like digging a well and not teaching people about how to maintain the well, but more than that, digging that well in a location that they didn't want. And that's the key aspect. So it has to be conversation. It is, as Jane said, a long road, because you're changing mindset. You're also taking groups who have assumption about one another. So in Haiti, it wasn't just the farmer, it was the service providers. And this is a big change. We're used to having what we call off-takers or buyers, suppliers. Those have to change. The reason why they exist is they're the ones who are currently providing the credit facility. They're buying from the farmer, but they're buying it with a very high risk to the farmer and risk to market. So if we can now start mapping value chains, so not supply chain, but the value chain, we can then start understanding what are the opportunities to create more value locally and have more finished product reaching markets, which mean more money for the communities. But other ways is also redistributing the roles and responsibility. And this is not something which is just for the Greater South. We've actually done project in the Greater North, where we did a project in Catalonia, where wine was created. So the roads actually show from Spain to Africa that were done. And there, the challenge is that they are overproducing the grapes because they receive maybe 2 cents out of the bottle that we pay $2,000 for. The challenge is that the farmer has a view. the agronomist has a view, the politician has a view, and the winemaker has a view. So if you can bring them together to have this conversation, then you can have that learning. And that learning looks different when you're doing it in a place like Catalonia than when you're doing it in Haiti. But both have one thing in common, is that you need to, there's one methodology that I love, which is the RACI, which is the responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. If you do that, and you define all your processes, then everyone can understand the role that they play and how they affect one another.
So the RACI, you mean, so it's clear who is responsible primarily, and then it's also clear who is accountable for that. Like, is there any other people that are accountable to the person responsible? And then the C is, who do you have to consult, but they don't really have but you should consult with them. And then other people you just need to inform. Mm-hmm. So when you say the RACI, that's what you mean by that. Great. Yeah. Is there anything you're working on right now that you're really excited about?
I'm absolutely excited. So we learned a lot from Haiti in that we built, first of all, I never built a system so fast in the back. Like what we were doing is that we were building a piece, showing it, and taking the week to build the rest. Part of the challenge was that Haiti when we were doing in 2019, so the world went in lockdown in 2020, but we had this term called pays lock, which was country lockdown in Haiti, started in 2018, because you couldn't move out of your house because the gang, and now you still have it, the insecurity. So we couldn't, on 2019, the team was actually kidnapped, and the World Bank had to pay a ransom that was kept very quiet. So as a result, we started using Zoom and in a way to actually teach. But it was great in a way because as a technologist, I wasn't on the ground, which meant that the learning and the accountability of what they were seeing had to come back. Sometimes it was really good. Sometimes I was like, please guys. But I learned from that how to actually start making people responsible. I was accountable for delivering the system, but I was not responsible for getting it on the ground. They had to do it themselves. So what we found was that because we were programming everything, we took a step back, and now we have created the ability not only to say any commodity, any composite, but what I'm more proud of is that we can actually sort of say, okay, this is not good for the international market. Is it good for the local market? If it's not good, do we use it in a second process? And you can start also reducing waste that way. So it becomes a very easy way for everybody to see and create the accountability. And what's great about the distributed ledger technology that we're using is we're not just tracking things, we're tracking the money back also. So everybody gets paid at the same time. So from that, I started also learning what was the role of the farmer who is doing the right thing, no tilling, using the right input, less water. Well, those are creating inset into the offset market. So what about we keep track of that? So this is what we're going on next with, how to keep track of that and also to reward and to continue that reward. Because one of the challenges we hear a lot about is how there is no evidence that the communities which are responsible for creating those nature base are getting rewarded. I'm a foodie. I don't want to see trees. I want to see mango trees. I want to see apple trees, those kind of things. So if the farmer is doing the right thing, let's make sure we can reward them, but not just today, because, and this is where blockchain technology comes in also. Some of you might have heard of the craze of the NFT, which is a non-fungible token, which means it's a token which cannot change. So if it represents X, it can never be Y. So it's kind of thinking like, I give you $1, you can give me back $1 with 4 quarters or anything you want so to change. But in this idea, if I give you X, you cannot give me a composite in a different way. So if we can use this in ways, we can actually keep track of who has participated. And that was, I will say, that was one of my best conversations in COP. I got to sit with one organization which is the largest provider of farmer software in Africa. They have about 10 million farmers. And then another partner that I had already, where we will come up with a methodology that allows for the recognition, not only of what's happening on the field, but what's happening at home. So bringing, and this is where it's very important, is bringing all the different pieces together. So the cook stove, the lights, the water, all of those things, and then creating a composite that gives a number of tons to that family, to that community, and then being able to show the money coming back to them.
It really sounds like there's a lot involved. I just have one quick follow-up question for you, which is, it sounds like you really need the engagement of the farmers. What was the single most important thing it took to engage farmers to want to participate?
I don't engage them. I go through the trust factors that they already have. They are usually IGOs. You know, why reinvent the wheel? We cannot. This is why I say the technology is secondary. I'm supporting those organizations. So we talk to USAID, we talk to Prosper. We'll work with even organizations which are, so Tingo Food is one of the organizations, and they're, so what is very important to me is that the organization is looking to empower other. I am a firm believer in what I call profit with purpose. So if you have purpose, all of you will profit together, and we will all do well together. But if you are trying to be profit with no purpose, then there is going to be a failure in communication or really meeting the needs of the community. And we have to empower communities now to actually do for themselves, because we're not going to always be there.
Couldn't agree more. Great answer. Thank you, Janvier. Okay, we are now going to go to Angelos. Angelos, you've been working on adaptation projects from a design and implementation perspective. You're an engineer. What happens when things don't go well? When they're not robust, the plans aren't robust, the design isn't robust? Can you share with some examples of some of the projects that you're aware of or that you've worked on? Some that have gone well and maybe some that haven't gone so well, and what advice would you offer in that space?
Sure. Is that on? Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you for the question. It's great to be here. Great insight from both speakers before me. I just have to say I'm very glad to be participating in a panel that's not just engineers, because oftentimes at COP you go and you mingle with your own, let's say, but then you don't get to hear about all the other great stuff that we do. And I think very inspirational opening from Jane. I really like the Harvard scribble, I think you referred to it. It's very true, and it also applies to how projects go. Normally you come up with the idea, you think it's going to be a nice straight line all the way to delivery and operation, but things happen, and I'll touch on those in a second. And I also like the Open Ledger conversation that we just had, because it's a very big part of the energy transition as well. The reason why I say this is because oftentimes we forget the importance of digitalization across sectors, and when it comes to infrastructure and the energy transition, digital twins will play a major role in tackling the efficiency problem and challenge that we have ahead of us. So a digital twin, just very briefly for those who don't know, is essentially a digital copy of a real world asset. So if you have a building or a solar farm or a wind farm or a battery site, you want to have an identical copy of that somewhere in the digital space so that you can actually monitor its performance, its operation, and so on. So I think it's through technologies like these that we will get to a point where we know we can prove digital identity as a real thing, which is now a very big challenge to the digital world, and use that verified identity to optimize our systems and achieve efficiency. So I think it's this cross-sectional interaction that brings about the changes that we need to meet our climate targets. To answer your question, Billy, I think we joke in my space that engineers only become famous when things go really wrong, you know, when a building falls down or a bridge goes, and that's a very sad place to be. It's very important, I think, for us to realize how much of a miracle, like a technological miracle it is to flick a switch and suddenly have light, or to have a magic box in your house that keeps things cold or at a freezing temperature. That's not something that happened instantly. It took a lot of bright minds, a lot of innovation to get us to that stage where we are, and that's how I see the role of engineers for the coming years. We have to make sure that this can continue. Infrastructure maintenance is a big challenge in the US, in Europe. It's an aging continent, and engineers come in to help maintain what we're used to, but also find ways to innovate, to make things better, to come up with better solutions, such as digital twins and open ledger for all of society, really. That's how I see it. I think there's plenty of examples to give where things don't go right or go wrong. There's a few that come to mind that I can touch on, and all of these have one thing in common. They have single points of failure. So when things go wrong on a big scale, it's when one of these single points of failure for an asset or a piece of infrastructure actually fails. An example I can give is a few years ago, I think it was 2.5 years ago, in the UK, I live in London, one of the major offshore wind farms had a fault on the main cable that connected it to the mainland, which resulted that within a few minutes at all of the northern UK's trains going offline. So when you're managing and operating an electricity system, you need to prioritize. If something goes wrong and you lose some generation, what is it that goes offline first? Like I said, you know, the fact that we flick a switch and the lights come on is has a very complex background to it. So when you lose a big part of your generating system, you will have to remove a big part of your demand at the same time so that your system can continue operating. So then engineers have to make the decision: do we lose streetlights? Do we lose electricity in a city? Or do we just take the trains offline for a few hours until we fix the problem? And there is, you know, this is not a decision that you can make on the spot when things go wrong. There are processes and structures in place as to how we tackle such challenges, and this is what happened at the time. And the trains, you know, transport is not, it's something that could be impacted in a black swan event, as we call it.
A black swan event, yeah. So let me see if I understood what you were saying. So what doesn't work is when you plan projects that have a single point of failure, which means that if something primary goes down, there is no plan or backup about how you're going to immediately address that. And if you don't think about that, when something goes down, it could go down bad. So asking the question, and a black swan event, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is when multiple failures occur simultaneously in a very unpredictable way that causes a significant negative impact. We could give many examples of a black swan. So the recommendation is when you are planning these energy projects, even at the smallest level, anticipate how could this go wrong and what would we do to back that up. And so it's a bit like scenario planning, where you're trying to figure out how could it go bad. And I know in some countries, there's lots of ways things could go bad. But think about, I'm just maybe suggesting that you think about the worst possible scenarios. Like if these three things all went wrong, or this one thing went wrong, how would we address it? Like disaster planning of some sort, really. Great. And I also know, Angelos, that you are a youth advocate in this space. Is there anything you could share with us about how you, and this question is really could be for everybody, but we'll start with you. How do you get youth involved in this kind of work? How do you, and where do you see it really is leveraging youth capability in this space? And why would you do it? Maybe that sounds like a silly question, but why get youth involved?
Why get youth involved? I think there's no reason not to get youth involved, especially when it comes to climate change. We are talking about protecting an ecosystem and a society that we know and love for future generations. The policies that we need implementing are not policies that are going to give us immediate effects. They're policies that are going to have an impact in the next 10, 15, 20 years. Having said that, we're already 10, 15, 20 years late, which also causes the problems that we see on a year-to-year basis now. In Europe, we had one of the warmest summers in history, and these extreme events will continue to happen regardless of what policy we put in place now. So one of the things that I do in the space is I lead the youth group for the Commonwealth Sustainable Energy Transition. This is an association of 56 countries of the Commonwealth, and we try to represent the youth in that space. The Commonwealth is 2.5 billion people. 60% of them, sorry about that. I had to emphasize that point, so the timing was excellent. So 60% of them are actually young people under 35. So wow. We are talking about 1 billion people within one organization, if you like, having a vested interest in the work that we do for the future generation. So it's crucial to get them involved. It's crucial to have the majority stakeholder of this conversation participate actively and effectively in the decision making. It's very important to give them the tools to be able to speak up and innovate and think outside the box, which is, I think, at the core of what they bring to the table. One more thing that young people can do that other generations maybe couldn't is communicate openly. So nowadays, thanks to the internet, thanks to all of the technologies that were mentioned beforehand, young people can connect and link with each other with a lot fewer barriers than previous generations. So I think this is one way we can actually get our policy and our work and our climate action to accelerate at the rate that we need it to. Because oftentimes we talk about international collaboration, we talk about knowledge transfer and bridging the skills gap, but geopolitics comes in the way, always. Interests come in the way, always. So one way to leapfrog over that or to jump over this barrier is to get the young people to talk to each other, because we don't, we will speak openly, we will speak our minds, and maybe that's the way we can get one company to collaborate with another that wouldn't previously. Or we could get the public sector and the private sector speaking a bit more openly, And at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of brilliant young minds out there that will also call people out. We will call people that don't deliver on their promises when they don't. And I think accountability in the space is crucial as well.
I love the points that you're making. Janvier, I can see you have something to add here.
Yeah, I have something to add. So we announced this week with UNFCCC the creation of the Digital Climate Library. So it is going to be the digitization of all the documents. And imagine floppy disk, not the 3.5, the 5.25 sitting in Bonn, and all that data going online. And this will feed very well in the work that Angelos is doing, because now this data will be available. But I got asked 2 days ago, and my role is going to be to bring in the partners, the technology, and the first thing is going to get this thing digitized and then get it financed. And it's not finance for today, it's finance for the future generation. And it was very interesting to speak to the person who heads the secretariat. And she talked about when they were doing the Paris Agreement, they needed to find a document for the Tokyo, and nobody had it. And it was finally after they had given up on the idea that they would have anything, and they found them in the castle, up in the roof somewhere. And this is the thing that we need to change so that the youth can understand. But I don't think it's only youth, it's even corporations. So if you're making an agreement, an idea of how you're going to decarbonize, what does the law and what has been said before, and even for investors. So it's going to be seminal. And hopefully by next year, we will be able to say a lot more. And my whole thing is, we do want the youth to say, what is it that how they want to interact with it. And this has been led by Arts Help. Arts Help is the largest conglomerate, I would say, of artists across the world. They have about 133 million artists, which are every type of artists and creatives that you can think of. So hopefully they will help also change the narrative.
That sounds amazing, and we can expect that in a year, is what you're saying?
We can expect it sooner than that. If
Oh,
I have
good. I
anything to
love
do with
that
it.
answer. Great. I'm going to come to the group, to the audience out here and see if there's some questions or comments you'd like to add to it. But first, I'm going to ask Jane. Jane, did you have anything you wanted to share specifically around how you engage youth in the work that you do in Wales?
Yes, I mean, it's you would expect as a body which is really focused on future generations for us to be taking this particular issue very, very seriously.
Yes, you'd hope.
We are the work that we're doing in the Wales Net Zero 2035 Challenge Group. We've divided into 5 challenges. 4 of them are linked to the kind of big emission areas in terms of food and building and energy and transport. And the other one is about education, skills and the future of work. So we're involving a lot of young people in terms of initiatives such as Teach the Future. We'll be working with the students. And we also have a Wales Youth Parliament. And that's very important to us because they are sitting at the table with us in terms of devising how we seek evidence. And there will be very important also that when we put out our draft conclusions in the spring, because our final report is due in the summer of 2024, that they will be going across all the schools and colleges in Wales and seeking testing our conclusions for which they will have been a part. And I think this is incredibly important, that actually we don't just think of future generations as generations yet to come, the unborn, but actually those people who are going to influence the next generation and the generation after that. So I often try and look at this in the context of being a grandmother, a relatively new grandmother.
Congratulations.
And thinking that, thank you, and thinking back to that notion of, my mother who's, in her 10th decade now, and my kind of granddaughter who is just 3, and then thinking about the sort of distance between them in terms of the lives they will experience. And that between them, that's going to be 200 years. And if we think about that notion that you therefore in your own family have access to potentially influence that links over that period of time, it's that 7 generations wisdom issues that I just think are so important in making sure that we take decisions now for current and future generations, but that we are always looking to future generations to lift the bar for the people that they will care about in time to come. And that actually doing this in a way that enables people to think about somebody they know, the oldest person they know and the youngest person they know. And that is getting some trajectory in working with young people in schools and colleges. So I think it's designing this in from the outset is absolutely critical.
That's a great perspective. I was thinking of the oldest person you know and the youngest person you know. I have no grandchildren yet, but I'm hoping. Okay, I'm going to go. I'm hoping. I'm going to go to the group. Is there anybody out here who wants to build, add something to say, or have a question to any of the panel members? Anybody? Okay, Chris.
Thanks a lot, Billy. Jane, I know, and of course I know you as well. It's been a fantastic conversation. One of the things that was just ringing at the back of my mind as the conversation was going on is now we've just started to see a bit of traction in the loss and damage funds. And one of the things that I've seen to be a question that is either asked directly or at the back of people's minds as they talk is, in the deployment of the funds, how do we manage risks, places that are considered to be very high risk, like the small islander developing states? And a good example that comes to my mind as it relates to adaptation is Puerto Rico. 2017, quarter 3 and quarter 4, Puerto Rico had some of the most devastating hurricanes, Hurricane Irma and Maria. And most of the installations they've got for, say, renewable energy or even like infrastructure were completely devastated, completely destroyed. And one of the questions that was just ringing at the back of my mind is what could have been done differently from an adaptation perspective that would have stopped that from happening? What sort of technologies could have been deployed? And a good example, for instance, say in solar is we've got systems that are quite resilient. Just sits between adaptation and resilience there to hurricanes. So rather than using, say, dual axis trackers, single axis trackers for your solar installs, you use, say, fixed track systems that are able to that you can fold and basically make them resilient to those kind of extreme weather events. And that coming back to the panel. Are there things that you would maybe in your experience recommend or have seen that would play in that space where it basically helps people to get past the impact of extreme weather events or any of the adaptation components that we've had to talk about all along in your space?
So my background is actually project manager to death. So one of the things that we have to change in how we create adaptation is not only the conversation, but really starting to use those tools that we already have in a project management. So it's great when you start having the engineers because they actually have that as part of it. They have to sort of think about what fails. So there's something called the RAIDs. So we talk about RACI, there's a RAIDs log, which are the risk and what could go wrong and who needs to be brought in and what are the opportunity for those things to actually happen. And so that brings me back to what I think is the most important thing, which is design thinking. So we need to design think situations and having that conversation. So now when the people say, oh, you have a great technology, I'm going, yeah, but you're not getting it right away. We're going to sit together, talk, understand, play it back, and then we build together with you so that you can scale. So to your example, if the questions were being asked, and I wish my friend was here, he actually grew up and ended up in a situation, so Joshua Lange, Josh is a PhD now in education, but Joshua didn't have the luck that some of us have having parents, so he ended up working as a mechanic, and he thought we needed to have a resilience in the west side of Florida, and everybody was like, no, you don't need that, we never get a hurricane. And he was able to get the rental company to actually have rental car when nobody else had and they were all flooded. So this is the planning that needs to happen. And this is the way we need to start thinking. And that's the design thing. You say, okay, this is the straight, but what are the ifs? What could happen? What are the paths that need to be taken as a result? And how do we all agree then that this is the right path? Or as Angelos has said, when is it that it's okay that you're not going to get home for 4 hours because the trains are not working and you just die with it?
Exactly. Okay, well, our time is just about up, but I'd like to complete with what I call a lightning round, which is I'm asking the panels to respond one sentence or a few words, or even a single word if you want, but it's a lightning round because it's just one sentence in response to this question, which is, what leadership capability or capacity do you think is most needed in the world today? What leadership capacity do you think is most needed in the world today? Let's start with you, Angelos.
Sacrifice. It's the sacrifice.
Sacrifice.
It's the one, if I can explain, because I know it's...
Three sentences,
okay.
Yeah.
I really think, and I see this in the youth space quite a bit, leaders today forget people don't work for them and they work for their people, right? You're not being asked to be a boss when you're voted into parliament or into power or whatever. You're asked to be a leader. So to be a leader, you need to sacrifice yourself for your people if you are to be, well, not to become a boss.
Sacrifice, great. I love it. Thank you. Nice. Janvier?
I chose one word also, empathy.
Empathy. Ah, beautiful. You get one more sentence if you want, since Angela's got. Anything else you want to add to that? No.
No.
I think that's all it needs to say. Great. Jane?
Integrity. I think the integrity is absolutely critical, because how can we be led by people who say one thing and do another? So integrity has to be at the core of what we all do if we're going to lead. And leading is not about leading from the front, it's about being trusted. So perhaps trust and integrity.
Okay, great.
Blockchain?
I will just leave you with this. We think that leadership is an act, it's not a position, and leadership comes from anywhere and everywhere. Anyone can show up with integrity, trust, empathy, and sacrifice. It's your choice on how you show up. And with that, I really want to thank our panelists for taking the time with us today. Fantastic conversation. Jane, thank you for calling in. And Chris, thank you for adding to the conversation. Thank you very much.